Welcome to Weird PVD, the podcast. Every week, your host, Sherry Kasperzak, takes you to the odd corners of beautiful Providence, Rhode Island. From big blue bugs to unique art, from weird history to weird food, you'll never look at Rhode Island's creative capital the same again. Tune in every Weird Wednesday. What is up, weirdos? Providence, Rhode Island is a city of old money, colonial streets, mob legends, and whispers of the occult. And looming above downtown is a towering relic of the roaring 1920s, the Grand Beaux Arts Hotel, once known as the Providence Biltmore. For nearly a century, guests have checked in, and some swear they've seen things that shouldn't be there. A man falling past their window, ghostly music drifting through empty hallways, doors locking themselves. But the strangest legend tied to this hotel isn't about ghosts at all. It's about the man who supposedly paid for it, a wealthy financier, if you will, and a rumored Satanist. A man whose name appears in countless ghost stories and every blog you can read on the subject, but almost nowhere else in history. His name was said to be Johann Lysa Weisskopf. And according to the legend, this entire hotel was built as a temple to Satan. This week on Weird PVD, the podcast, we are diving into one of New England's strangest urban legends, the satanic financier of the Biltmore. But the truth? It may be even stranger than the myth. To understand the legend, you really have to understand Providence in the early 1900s. It was a booming industrial center, but it didn't have a world class hotel. City leaders worried that wealthy visitors and business leaders, politicians, and entertainers were simply passing Providence by. So, the Providence Chamber of Commerce launched an ambitious plan. They wanted a luxury hotel, one that would rival any of the hotels in New York or Boston, and they decided to build it themselves. Local businesses and citizens invested in the project, about 1,800 people in total, and they all contributed about $2.5 million by 1920. Now, at the time, this was a massive amount of money. But the hotel would be run by the famous Bowman Biltmore Hotel chain, led by hotel entrepreneurs John McEntee Bowman and Lewis Wallach. For the design, they hired a prestigious architecture firm, Warren and Wetmore, the same firm that designed New York City Grand Central Terminal. The result was an 18-story tower, ballrooms, fine dining rooms, hundreds of guest rooms. And when the hotel opened on June 6, 1922, it was the grandest building in all of Providence and almost immediately became the center of the city's nightlife. The 1920s were the roaring 20s, but they were also an era of prohibition. Alcohol was illegal, but Providence, well, it was one defiant, wet city. It never ratified the 18th Amendment that banned production and sale of alcohol. Speakeasies, bootleggers, and illegal distilleries ran rampant into the city, which, of course, meant people drank more than ever, and the Biltmore quickly gained a reputation as one of the most glamorous and wild places in the region. Celebrities stayed there, musicians, actors, writers. Guests reportedly included a jazz legend Louis Armstrong, Hollywood star Douglas Fairbanks, and literary power couple, yes, the F. Scott and Zelda Fitzgerald. It is so Art Deco 1920s, and I love it. In the basement, rumors spread that a speakeasy operated behind closed doors, serving alcohol to the city's elite. Mobsters were said to frequent the hotel. Politicians partied there, and the Bacante dining room became infamous for its decadent atmosphere. For many people, the Biltmore represented the height of excess in the jazz age. But the stories didn't stop at bootlegging and parties. Soon, whispers began circulating about something much darker. According to local lore, the man who financed the hotel was a mysterious figure named Johann Lysa Weisskopf. And he wasn't just wealthy, he was supposedly a devout Satanist. The legend says Weisskopf believed the Biltmore would serve as a kind of cultural Trojan horse for him. It was a way to introduce the puritanical New Englanders to the pleasures of decadence and eventually to Satanism itself. And if you believe the stories, he designed parts of the hotel with ritual in mind. For example, on the roof, there were chicken coops. According to legend, these weren't for food, they were supposedly to provide animals for ritual sacrifice. In the basement, there were said to be hot springs or ritual baths used in occult purification ceremonies. Weisskopf held weekly satanic gatherings inside the hotel itself. And if that sounds dramatic, the stories get even darker. Some versions of the legend claim that during Prohibition, the Biltmore became the scene of multiple murders tied to mob activity and occult rituals. Others say the building became haunted because of the violence committed there. Ghosts wandering the hallways, phantom parties, and perhaps the most famous of all, that falling man I mentioned before. Guests at the Biltmore have long reported a chilling sight. Late at night, someone glances toward the window and sees a man falling past it, not jumping, falling, as if he's already mid plummet. People rush to the window, they look down at the street, but there's never a body. The legend says this ghost is a wealthy financier who lost everything in the 1929 stock market crash and leapt from the hotel's upper floors. Guests say they've seen the figure falling past their windows many times over the years. Some have even called the front desk to report a suicide in progress, but when the staff go outside, there's nothing there. The story became one of the most famous ghost tales in New England. But there's just one problem. Like the satanic financier, the falling banker may have never existed. Here's where the story gets strange. Researchers investigating the Biltmore's history ran into a problem when they couldn't find any reliable historical record of Johann Lysa Weisskopf. No business documents, no property records, no newspaper mentions, nothing. And if you're like me and you did a deep dive into where this guy came from and who he might have been, you'll find a ton of blog posts that mention his name and even claim very boldly that he was the financier of the Biltmore Hotel in Providence. But there's no actual documentation of him. There's no mention of where he was born or if he immigrated to the US from someplace like Germany. And I'll tell you something, because I am a nerd and I'm here to provide you with the best possible service here at Weird PVD, the podcast, I did a little research to find out what Leise Weisskopf really translates to from German. It turns out Leise roughly translates to quiet, and Weisskopf is whitehead. And I came up with a bit of a theory about this that perhaps it was a moniker given to this mysterious figure by somebody who wanted to make a little bit of a joke, something like the Quiet Whitehead, this figure who doesn't exist. Now, that's a stretch. I have nothing to base my theory on other than my nerdiness. But there's no mention of this man in any formal capacity. He is a phantom, which seems pretty fitting. For a man supposedly wealthy enough to finance a massive luxury hotel, that's pretty unusual, don't you think? Historians digging through archives have concluded that the story likely emerged decades after the hotel opened. In fact, the real financing of the Biltmore looks very different and even a bit cheery. Instead of one mysterious financier, the project was funded by hundreds of local investors and business leaders organized through the Chamber of Commerce. And those strange features tied to the occult rituals, they probably had far more ordinary explanations. Remember the chicken coops I mentioned? Well, they were real, but they weren't for satanic sacrifices. They were part of an early urban farming experiment, which is kind of a cool thing in and of itself, right? Hotel manager Lewis Wallach created a rooftop garden and poultry farm that produced fresh eggs and vegetables and flowers for the hotel kitchen. And in the 1920s, this was actually a novelty that attracted national attention. Guests loved the idea that their breakfast eggs came from chicken raised on the roof of the hotel. And those supposed ritual baths in the basement, there's no credible historical evidence that they ever existed. So, if the occult story isn't real, where did it come from? Now, Johann Lysa Weisskopf isn't a name that people would probably pull out of thin air. So, where did this story come from? And where did he come from? Now, urban legends rarely appear overnight, they grow. And the Biltmore had all the ingredients for a good ghost story: a towering 1920s building, prohibition parties, rumors of mobsters, and a city already infamous for corruption and organized crime. Add a mysterious European name like Weisskopf, and suddenly the story sounds believable, especially decades later when memories fade and the details get fuzzy. Over time, the myth evolved. The rooftop chickens became a sacrifice, the garden became a ritual site, the wealthy investor became a Satanist, and a tragic suicide became a ghost falling past windows. The legend spread through ghost tours, paranormal blogs, and local storytelling. And in fact, I have to give a shout out here to Courtney from Providence Ghost Tours because she is the one who turned me on to the legend of Johann Lysa Weisskopf. So thank you so much, Courtney, for that. And if you have not checked out Providence Ghost Tours, go do it now. Go check out their Instagram. Go on one of their tours. They are amazing. Courtney is awesome. She is an incredibly knowledgeable guide. So, quick PSA and shout out to the folks over at Providence Ghost Tours. But back to the story. Sometimes legends are just more powerful than the truth. Even if the satanic financier never existed, the Biltmore, if you've never been there, you need to go. It's now the Graduate. It has a strange energy. The building has seen a century of history: the roaring 20s, the Great Depression, World War II, mob influence, decades of changing ownership. At one point in the 1970s, the hotel even closed and sat abandoned before being saved from demolition. Today, it stands in downtown Providence, renamed and renovated, but unmistakably the same. In fact, the beautiful, bright lights of the Biltmore still glow every night here in Providence. Guests still report strange experiences, staff still hear stories, and the myth of Johann Lysa Weisskopf continues to circulate online. Do a Google search, and all you will find are blog posts that mention Johann Lysa Weisskopf as the satanic financier of the Biltmore Hotel in Providence. You might say that his legend, though, is a type of ghost story that's not really attached to a spirit, but to a man who might have never existed at all. So, was the Biltmore built by a Satanist? Probably not. But legends don't survive because they're true. They survive because they're irresistible. A mysterious financier, occult rituals, mobsters and ghosts. It's the perfect story for a city like Providence. And maybe that's the real magic of the Biltmore. Not that it was ever a temple to Satan, but that 100 years later, people still want to believe that it might have been. So next time you're in Providence, look up at the towering Biltmore Hotel and those beautiful, bright Biltmore lights. And imagine the jazz bands playing, the secret speakeasies, and those rooftop chickens. And somewhere in the shadows, perhaps the phantom of the man who may have never financed the place at all. Thank you so much for joining me on this week's episode of Weird PVD, the podcast. If you would be so kind, please subscribe if you're watching on YouTube and give me a follow on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. You can also find me on Instagram at weird underscore PVD. It's a great community over there featuring all the weird, wonderful, wild art, food, and culture that Providence has to offer. And if you're a fan of weird history, medical oddities, and the like, you might love my TikTok channel. You can find me over there at weird.pvd. So give me a follow. And don't forget to keep PVD weird.